people on your side anyway, so we want to make sure that's the one we get right.
Cool. All right, I'm live. All right, so welcome, guys. This is the much-awaited part two to the professor debate. It's pretty funny. I've just been calling you the professor, but yeah. So we decided because we got a lot of feedback from the first one. A lot of it was positive, but there was also some constructive feedback, and one of it was that our debate was largely a clusterfuck, and part of that blame is on me because I also kind of got derailed really fast. So we decided ahead of time to prepare the topics that we're going to debate. And we're going to, generally speaking, focus on those topics. We're not going to have like a hard time limit, but we're generally speaking going to stick to more or less 30 minutes per topic, 3 topics that we want to go through. But if we get through 2 of these topics, I'll be happy. And then we can do a part 3 for the 3rd topic. So let's kick off these topics. So the first one, I'm just going to quickly announce them, is whether the double standard is fair. And specifically, this means shaming men who express desire not to date overweight girls while allowing women who have, their own physical preferences not to be shamed, right? That's the first one. The second one is tying, and this is an issue I had with your content, is I think you tie a lot of the dating issues to patriarchy or white supremacy. And I think some of them could be potentially tied into that, but a lot of them can't. So we're going to get through that. And then the last one is going to be the overall net effect of our content, right? So my speculation is that the overall net effect of my content is much more positive than yours. But again, we can kind of get into that. So those are the 3 topics. Do you want to say anything as like an introduction before we get into the first one?
I don't know. Do you think I should reintroduce myself to your?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Well, so my name's James. I go by the handle that you see here, Jucifer. That's my TikTok handle. I am a professor of interpersonal communication. That's what my PhD is in. And on social media, at least, the thing that I do more than anything else is I leverage scholarly or empirical data to debunk false claims about dating and relationships. So that's kind of how I'm going to say that's how we met. Is that a good way of saying it? We met online, which is what we'll tell our parents.
We met on the internet. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. And guys, let's all try to be nice in the chat. Sorry, I see you as Jucifer, but what's your name again?
James.
James. Okay. Yeah. Because it's going to be weird if I call you Jucifer. James. Yeah. Let's all be nice to James. He was cool enough to come on for debate part 2. And I always say it takes courage and balls to be able to have conversations with people who think differently than you. That's more than 99.9% of the internet is willing to do, as I've learned. So that automatically gets you some respect from me. All right, so let's kick it off with the first one. And this, I think, was the initial thing that kicked off, I guess, our interaction, because you did a response video to my initial video where I was pointing out the double standard. So I don't think we need to play all the TikToks. I'll just do a very quick refresh. So in my initial video, I was arguing that it was pretty hypocritical for women to shame men, or it's not just women, some men too, for women and some men to shame the other men who express dating preferences. Like, for example, not wanting overweight women or not wanting ultra skinny women. You can have any number of dating preferences while at the same time having their own dating preferences, like no short guys or no broke guys or anything like that, right? I found it a little hypocritical. And my position, just to clarify, is that I think everyone's entitled to their dating preferences. So if a woman doesn't want to date a short guy, nothing wrong with that at all. Just like there's nothing wrong with a guy who doesn't want to date an overweight girl, or a guy who doesn't want to date an ultra skinny girl, or a guy who doesn't want. We're all entitled to our own physical preferences. That's my position on that. But you made a response video basically criticizing my position in favor of the double standard. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, where you said, well, actually, it makes sense for the men to be more or less shamed for expressing their physical preferences, but for women it's a little bit different, right? You were in favor of arguing for the double standard, is that correct?
Well, not really. So I think that the main area, because I was thinking about this after the last time we looked up, I think that the primary disagreement is not on whether or not men should be able to have their preference versus women. I think that that's the perspective that you would like to take, right? I got that right? That everyone should just have their preference, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'm cool with either gender having their preferences, and I don't think anyone should be shamed for it.
Sure. And that's reasonable, right? Where I think the disagreement occurs is the nature of the double standard, right? So I would assert that the thing that you've described here is not a double standard. You are describing the way that you see the world, right? So double standards are things that can be documented, things that have historical precedent, things that are, demonstrable and have been, discussed. There has been discourse, et cetera, et cetera. So here's a couple of examples. One really obvious double standard that exists between men and women is childlessness, right? Historically, women have been shamed for not producing children, right? We see this throughout history. They've called women old maids. The patriarchal, religious, and unfortunately, white supremacist Western structure that we encounter here encourages women to produce children and to raise those children. And when they don't, it's considered a failure. But when men do not produce children, they are not subject to those same sorts of societal criticisms. And that's the key word. That's the operative word, societal criticisms, right? I will 100% concede that there are women who exist who make fun of short men. I don't think that that's right? Even if it is in response to them being terrible, I don't advocate for it. I can't stop them. But the greater disagreement that we're encountering here is the nexus of what is a double standard, right?
So
I think that's the area.
Let me clarify. So are you arguing that this double standard that I'm saying doesn't even exist? Is that your claim, or?
I think that's a little too bold, right? What I'm trying to say is that we are in disagreement as to what constitutes a double standard, right? A double standard is driven by the power structures that exist within a society, right?
Okay, so let's just do a thought experiment. So hypothetically speaking, assume the premises I'm giving you are true. So let's assume that men, when they go online, they express their physical preferences, they get shamed by women and by some other men. Let's also assume that this premise is true. Then when women go online and they express their physical preferences, they don't get shamed. Would you say that's a double standard?
I would say that if there was a history, right, a decades long, perhaps centuries long, perhaps history of that sort of thing occurring, if we saw in popular culture historically men being subjected to physical and psychological torture because of their lack of vertical aptitude, and that it was affecting the lifespan, the life satisfaction, suicide rates, things like that. If that were a documented historical occurrence, then I would be 100% in agreement with you. But that is unfortunately not what we see. And indeed, we see quite very much the opposite in terms of young women and girls being encouraged to engage in self-harm and to put their bodies at risk for the sake of pleasing society, which is, of course, historically, and we talked about this last time, controlled and operated by powerful men.
Okay, and I'm going to cite sources later on that actually are going to argue against a lot of the stuff you said, which is that there. But let's just assume. I think the confusion lies in the definition of double standard. In order to have a double standard, you don't need a historical precedent of oppression. You just need a double standard. You need two parties that get treated differently. There doesn't need to be a long history, and we can go to the standard textbook definition of a double standard, but there doesn't need to be, in the scenario I gave, assuming those premises are true, that would constitute a double standard. Some double standards are not that bad. For example, there's a double standard that a woman, when she goes to a bar, she will usually be able to skip the line, right, and get in the bar, versus a man, he can't do that the vast majority of the time unless he's a celebrity, right? But that's a double standard that's makes sense, because otherwise the bars would be largely sausage fest, right? So that's not in anyone's best interest. So some of these there doesn't need to be this sinister element to a double standard.
I think you're forgetting a really important thing about the example that you just gave, which is that the whole reason that women are given preference in bars like that is to attract men, to attract more men to come into the bar and spend more money. So the very idea of, let's let the women in, did you go to college? I don't know if you went, did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to BU.
Very nice. I went to Rutgers, right? During college, it was $5 a cup for a guy, ladies get in free, right? That was a standard. I mean, you could argue that that's a double standard, but why do we do that? we do that to attract more gentlemen. It is done for the purpose of satiating the male gaze. We get women there so that men can attend and spend money, right? And this is the tie that we'll later explore between things like capitalism and Western exceptionalism and, dating in general. That's where that intersection meets. It meets at the male gaze.
The reason for the double standard doesn't matter in the existence of a double standard. The reason why, like, we can acknowledge that you have a man bun without us getting into the reason why you have a man bun. That part doesn't matter. You still have a man bun. That's a fact that we can observe.
Yeah, but how is that? That's not a double standard. That's just me putting my hair up.
I'm not talking. I'm just making the point that the reason doesn't need to be inherent to the definition. You can have a double standard without a strong reason why. It doesn't have to always logically make sense. Some of them do, and some of them don't. Right? You don't need. Like, if we look up, like, we can look up double standard right now. And again, this just has to do with the existence of a double standard, like a standard for two parties that is different, right? Which is what exists in the situation. The why of it doesn't matter for the existence of a double standard. Do you see what I'm getting at?
I think it very much matters, right? Because if we can't understand why the double standard, or why the two, in this case, the two genders are being treated differently, we're not going to be able to fully wrap our head around exactly what is happening,
But you can have a double standard without fully understanding why it exists, without the reasons making sense to you, without the reasons. What you're implying is that for double standard to exist, there needs to be some sinister intention behind it. And that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. Yeah, there's some double standards that follow that train of thought, but there's also a lot of double standards that don't really make sense, or they're just outdated. There's double standards that exist all over the place. Like, I can give you double standards for days. When a man hooks up with a bunch of girls, he's rewarded and he's told he's a pimp. When a woman has sex with a bunch of guys, she's slut shamed, generally speaking, right? That one's a little bit outdated, right? But it still exists. So we don't have to always have like these, like, I think the best way to do this is just for us to look up the definition of double standard, because I think you're setting all these parameters for the existence of double standards that don't actually need to exist for double standard to be accurate. In the example I gave, that would be a clear double standard. What?
Right? So you're saying men and women are treated different in so much as we do not punish women for having a preference of short men, but we do punish men for having a preference for not wanting to date bigger bodied women, right? That's the double standard that we're talking about. So let's just circle back to that real quick. First thing, there are millions of men who love bigger bodied women, who praise bigger bodied women. It's a whole portion of like the kink community, right? So that exists, right?
There's also just a bunch of women who like shorter guys. I mean, there's always exceptions for every rule.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, because when we have the conversation that we're having, we tend to erase those large groups of people, and they are quite large groups of people. And so we must remember that. And then we also must remember that when we're talking about, as you call it, this double standard, what I'm trying to explain is that the double standard becomes meaningful when it gains societal momentum, which you could argue at this point, it is more societally acceptable for women to make fun of short men than it is for men to make fun of bigger bodied women. You could argue that we're trending in that direction, and I would grant you credence there, but that is not where we have lived historically up until, I don't know, the last 10 or 15 years maximum.
Okay, can you at the very least grant the fact that the double standard exists, but it just may not be significant in your opinion?
Again, I do want to push back on like the nature of the double standard that you're offering here.
I think that you can just Google double standard and find a definition, because I think.
Well, I think if you look up Webster's, you're going to miss some of the important nuance, like the contextual, the historical, and the societal nuance missed. Like, for example, let's talk about a double standard that very much hurts men. Okay, virginity, right? Men are shamed for being virgins, right? We know this, right? Women are praised historically for being virgins. Now we're drifting away from that, right? Wouldn't you say? We're drifting away from that. But historically, men are punished for being virgins. Now, the research tells us that the majority of people who shame men for being virgins are actually other men. But when it comes to a double standard, right, that is something that has historically existed. There is historical precedence for it. This goes back hundreds of years, if not greater than that, the pressure for men to lose their virginity and the pressure on women to maintain their virginity, right? Now that carries with it very important societal context and weight, and it hurts men, and it of course also hurts women as well. But what you're describing here is a much more recent social interaction that I personally would argue is really only experienced by men who have a propensity to do harm to women, right? So when you're out in the wild, we often don't see women walking down the street and going, look at that short guy, look at that short guy, look at that weird little short guy. That's not happening. That's not happening. But what we have seen is men walking down the street insulting women for being bigger bodied. And that's the difference between like a meaningful, historically precedented double standard and like some guys getting pissed off because in retaliation to them making fun of bigger bodied women, women are now making fun of their height. Wouldn't be for me, but that's what we're experiencing.
I think we need to dial it back. So first off, what is a double standard? A rule or principle which is unfairly applied in different ways to different people or groups. It doesn't say anything here about this double standard being applied for a big period of history or being very significant in its consequence. Simply a rule or principle. So you can argue that the double standard I'm claiming is insignificant in your opinion, but you can't argue against its existence because what I described literally verbatim falls in the definition of a double standard. Like you'd be hard. Like, I don't know how you could say that what I just described, assuming my premises are true, would not constitute a double standard by any standard textbook definition.
Okay. So again, this is why I say that doing something like just turning to like a textbook definition, it robs the discussion of its nuance. So for example, I got a couple of citations here. The first one is by, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Reichen and Mers. It's from 2014. They talk about some of the double standards and norms that exist between men and women. I sent you this list of resources earlier. They're offering their academic, their scholarly, their expert definition of what a double standard is much more than one sentence, right? And that's important to note because people who study double standards professionally from an expert level have concluded that there's simply much more to it than just simply one sentence. And when you try and put it in a box like that, it results in myopic conversations that don't really take us anywhere. And it allows you to do something like equate what you have observed in terms of, some women poking fun at some men's height, which again, I don't support that, right? But it allows you to equate that to the large sweeping societal double standards that have harmed both men and women. And those two things are just simply not equal. So perhaps we can agree on the textbook definition of a double standard, but perhaps we can also agree that the impact of these double standards is dramatically different in so much as yours doesn't really do a whole lot to affect men, and those that I have documented do a lot to harm men and women.
Well, that's a separate argument. Yes, that's a separate argument. Now, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that you can claim that the double standard I'm talking about is overall irrelevant in terms of society. That's fine. That's a different discussion. But to claim that it's not a double standard at all, what I described is pretty disgenuine. So that's a separate discussion on whether.
How about this? I'll concede that what you've described is a double standard if you concede that it's insignificant.
No, I'm not going to concede that it's insignificant. You'd have to show me evidence that it's insignificant. Now, I can tell you myself.
Hold on. Scientifically, that's not possible. You can't prove a null. I just want to make sure that that's known. I can show you evidence of other double standards that have been documented. I can show you that there is a lack of evidence supporting that what you say is societally insignificant. But what I cannot do, and what no researcher could do, is prove a null. And I don't want to say that to be I just want to make sure that we're clear on what can and can't be done by science.
Right. So then why would I accept the premise that it's irrelevant based on no data or arguments? Like, you have to present some kind of argument for me to concede. Like, my argument for the existence of this double standard was pretty straightforward. Here's the definition of double standard. Here's what it is. Logically, this applies as a double standard. You have to present.
I said, I'm willing to concede that. If you can concede that based on the evidence, there's no scientific or historical precedent for what you're describing, and that there is evidence of other documented double standards that very much do exist. What you've described is simply not there.
So there's a big problem with that logic, and that's because all this stuff is basically only come on is a phenomenon of recent social media. So this double standard has only been around for 5-10 years. It hasn't been around for a long period of time. So yeah, I wouldn't expect there to be a lot of scientific data on it. But I can tell you, and I know you're going to dismiss this as firsthand evidence, but firsthand evidence I think gives some credence, is that when I made my video where I was expressing my preference for not dating overweight women, I was shamed for it relentlessly, right? But then
because you're contributing to the historical double standard of punishing bigger bodied women for existing, which is not good. And I'm not going to insult you for that.
I'm not punishing them. I just simply don't want to date them.
Yes, but what you're doing is you are normalizing as the finding of their bodies inherently unwell and inherently less desirable, when, as we both conceded, there's a large group of people who prefer bigger bodied women. And so when you do that, not only do you harm the bigger bodied women, but you're also doing harm to the men who prefer bigger bodied women, because they feel like they can't come to your space and express their preferences.
Well, first of all, it is less desirable. If you're a bigger bodied woman, that carries a whole host of health effects, and you're going to live a shorter life, a less quality of life in terms of your health benefits. So I don't think you're doing them any benefits by rationalizing them being overweight. Should we treat them with dignity and respect? Sure. But should we rationalize their lifestyle choices? I think not. But that's going to be more in the part 3 of this topic. So basically, again, going back to what I was saying, is when I made that video, I got shamed relentlessly for it. I got called fat phobic. I got called a racist somehow. I don't even know how that makes me racist. I got called every name in the book. But when I see girls time and time again making videos saying, I don't date those short motherfuckers, there's no consequences. It's just considered them having standards. Again, that's okay. I just don't think there should be any consequences for men expressing their preference for not dating overweight women, especially since there's tangible downsides.
There's plenty of consequences for those women who say that, right? So, I, for example, have a number of mutuals on TikTok who are women. I have a number of mutuals on TikTok who are women who are kind of mean to men, and they share in friends only posts some of the feedback that they receive from men, right? And it's not pleasant. So to say that these women just get away with what they're doing scot-free, untrue, just simply untrue, demonstrably false. But I think you make a really good point in the way that you're sort of categorizing this idea of like, well, I should be able to say one thing, and if someone else says something that's equally terrible, we should both face similar consequences for it. I agree. Right?
I don't think it's terrible, but yes.
Right? Like, if you're going to say bad things about people, you can expect people to come to you with that same energy. And if I remember correctly, and I know I do, last week you said something that was very meaningful to me, which is you are what you attract, right? And so if you're attracting a bunch of angry women who don't like what you're saying, and a bunch of men who are shouting down those women,
Okay, well, first of all, again, I don't want to get off topic, but I do not attract primarily angry women. All the girls I date are very loving.
Well, I meant on social media. I'm sorry, I meant on social media.
Sometimes to some extent on TikTok, I also attract a lot of awesome women who DM me and who are great or kind-hearted and who reciprocate, who understand and enjoy my content. So I don't know about that. But I guess, like, again, dialing this back to the initial topic at hand, I just think that, like, okay, if your position is that if your position is that it's okay for both parties, men and women, to have their physical preferences, then I think you should come out and just say, okay, well, then the double standard doesn't make sense. Or if you think that both are messed up, then you should say, well, it's wrong when Alex does it, but it's also wrong when women do it. But if you're going to do it like in this, like, it's okay when women express preferences, which you did in that initial video, but it's not okay when men do it, that's where I see a big logical gap.
I see. So here's my counter to that. My counter to that is you are coming unprompted to say things like, here's how you can tell if she's fat fishing you. Right? I don't think you used that exact word, but surely that was the purpose of at least one or more of your videos, right? Here's how you can tell if you're fat fishing you. That's a nasty thing to say, man. And you might not think it is, but it just is, man. It's rude and it's mean. Nobody needs to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it. Bigger bodied women, more so than smaller bodied women, already have self-esteem issues, health issues, life dissatisfaction, as you noted. And so when you come on social media and you say, here's how to make sure you don't end up with one of those, because like, forget if they're like a good, loving, caring person who wants to better themselves. What matters is their weight and body appearance. Like, that's going to bother people, and you're going to suffer repercussions for that. And like me, in my worldview, hey man, if those women didn't reply to you, you'd still be saying what you're saying. So it's either you're saying the things
well, I'm still going to be saying what I'm saying. Their actions had zero impact on me. Like, they didn't affect me at all.
Sure, I can tell. But what I'm saying is it's either you're saying what you're saying unchecked and undebated, or you're saying what you're saying and it's being debated and it's being countered. So it's one or the other.
Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. Why is it horrible for me to express my preferences and the preferences of millions of men, and for a lot of men who don't want to be secretly fat fished, right? That's a term I just made up. Why is it so wrong?
What are you talking about?
Why is it so wrong for them to have some kind of a way to screen out against them being catfish? Why is that so demonstrably wrong?
Well, because of, you guessed it, the double standard. The way that bigger bodied women are treated by society. They are treated inherently unwell. They are treated different. They are treated like they're gross. And those treatments lead to a number of mental and physical health problems. Now, here's the deal, right? If there is an individual, man or woman, who takes a bunch of pictures of themselves that presents them in a misleading light, like you show up, they look completely different from how they look, right? Kind of like how when you were debating that black pillar and you were showing him your Instagram profile and you were like, I don't do any of this stuff. This is just, I'm just trying to make myself look desirable, right? We all do that. We all lie on social media, right? We try to make ourselves look like the best version of ourselves. But if someone does it to the extent so egregiously that you can't even tell what they look like, now that's wrong. That's an act of deception. And I'll stand by that.
Okay, well, I'm glad you feel that way, because that's what my video was literally intended against. Like, why would you? There's zero reason to send the line I recommend to a girl who shows clear body photos. This is for a girl who is very sneaky with her appearance. So yes, that is literally what the video is designed to prevent.
Okay, but I think you were doing a little bit more than you intended if that's the case, right? Because what you're doing there is you, maybe unintentionally, are encouraging men to view bigger bodied women as of less value inherently than women who are, in better shape or are slimmer. And look, if someone has their preference, that's totally okay. But what we must not do is create an environment where one group of people is considered less than another group of people simply because of their appearance. You can call them different, definitely call them different, but you can't create an environment where they're considered less than. And like it or not, your videos do in fact do that.
Well, let's be real. Overweight people in general, I'm not going to just tie this back to women, in some ways are less than. They're less in terms of their health. That's just a scientific fact. Every single doctor will agree with you that being overweight, it carries a lot of consequences. So that's one area. Two, in terms of sexual attractiveness, yes, of course, there's some guys who like chubby girls, but more men do not, right? So a woman, if she wants to improve her dating prospects, losing weight will be very beneficial for her. So is she less than in terms of her value as a human being? No. But are there other areas which are tangible in which her being overweight will make her, quote unquote, less than a girl who's not overweight? The answer is yes. In terms of health, in terms of her ability to find the kind of partner that she wants, yes, and yes. So we're not doing them any favors by denying the reality and saying, oh, well, it's just a different type of body. You'll have the same health lifestyle, or you'll have the same luck as a girl who's skinnier. That's just not true.
So valid points. Let me say two things. And then maybe we can move on to the next topic because we're right about at a half hour. You're not their doctor. You have no idea what their health is like, right? Now, you can assume that overweight or obese people are overall less healthy than people who are not that. Of course, I don't know why you would, stick your business in their health problems, right? If you don't prefer bigger bodied women, I don't know why you're talking about them in the first place. So one, you're not their doctor, right? Two, I'm going to use the word audacity, the audacity to suggest that body type and body type alone dictates value I mean, it's just, that is why you want to know why some women poke fun at men's height. It is to attempt to even the playing field. I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do, but it is an attempt to even the playing field because of men like you who spread implicitly and explicitly sometimes these philosophies that are designed to treat bigger bodied women as less than. And you just admitted that you view them as less than, which in my opinion is problematic.
Less than in some ways, not in terms of their inherent value as a human being or inherent.
Would you make a video saying that? Would you be willing to make like a TikTok saying, hey, I just want everyone to know that I view bigger bodied women as inherently as valuable as women who are in shape? Would you be willing to make a video and stand by that?
Yeah, but as long as I can clarify what I mean, but I would want to add the fact, all the other things I said about, because yeah, I don't want what I don't want to do. Again, this is going to get to the third topic, is spread disinformation, and you don't need to be someone's doctor to recognize a simple medical fact that every single doctor agrees on, and that being obese has a whole host of health consequences. I don't need to be her doctor to know that. That is common medical information. Every single doctor knows
to tell her that and to give her advice on that, which is what I'm saying.
I'm not trying to give them advice. I'm explaining. I'm not trying to advise. I'm not trying to be a health coach. That's different. I'm simply explaining to you when you're saying that, well, dude, it's just a different lifestyle choice. I'm saying it is in some ways tangibly an inferior lifestyle choice because of the health, detrimental effects that it carries. That is one reason. Like, do you disagree with that? Do you think that being obese is just as healthy as being regular weight for your height?
Well, on the whole, I would say that people who are overweight tend to suffer from more health complications than people who are not. I don't think that there's any debate on that. What I'm saying is that, let me try and phrase it differently. I would propose that it is your word choice. It is the nature of your content. It is your hyper focus on the physical and the exchangeable that gives the impression that you view bigger bodied women as inherently less valuable, which is a historical double standard.
Again, less valuable in terms of what? Less valuable as a human being, or less valuable as a potential partner, or less valuable in terms of what? Like, you have to clarify on that. That's a very vague term.
I would say based on your content, less valuable as a partner because you talk a lot about dating and relationships, and less valuable as a human being based on little more than the reaction that you get from a shocking number of women.
Okay,
who are both bigger-bodied and not bigger-bodied.
Okay, so 1 million women could do reaction videos to me that still wouldn't be in any way indicative that I view overweight women as less than a human being. So no, that is not true. I don't think there are less.
Well, it would be evidence that you're hurting 1 million women, wouldn't it?
No, just because someone makes a reaction video to you doesn't mean you're hurting them.
Well, if they make a reaction video saying, this guy is wrong, this guy's a jerk, whatever, surely they don't agree with you. Surely they feel attacked by you. Surely they feel the need to speak up in defense of themselves because of the attack that you are inciting upon them.
Yeah, more often than not, they're just virtue signaling and they're trying to show off on the internet how virtuous they are. But that's a whole phenomenon.
That feels very convenient. That feels very convenient. That feels like you trying to justify saying awful stuff.
Again, like you keep saying, like I say awful stuff. Is the awful stuff what I said earlier that I prefer not to date overweight women? Is this the awful stuff in question? What's the awful stuff?
It is the presentation of certain types of women as inherently less valuable than other types of women. I've got a good example for you. You posted a video. Let's see, what date was this? I think it was on May 9th. Is she a gold digger or is she DTF? Okay. Now you got to know that that's a controversial title right off the bat, right? Like I'm sure you called it that too.
Yeah, that's why I used it.
But yeah, you used it to be controversial. So inherently that you're going to be harming people, upsetting people, disrupting vulnerable groups by doing that.
Who are the vulnerable groups? They're gold diggers?
Well, no, just women in general, right? So what you're doing is you're painting women in such a way where you talk about this, you talk about women in such a way that you're basically teaching men that, hey, women can be bought, sold, and traded as long as you get sex at the end of it. Now, you don't say those words, right? If you said those words, it'd be a lot worse.
Dude, those are like a series of assumptions you just made. That whole video was about a text interaction that a guy I know had with a girl, where she was being a little vague about whether she wanted to hook up with him or she wanted money from him. And the title was characterizing that. Those are all just assumptions that you made in your head. None of them are actually based in reality at all.
Yeah. So here's the problem, right? Here's the problem with interpretation. Because when you make an intentionally controversial video, right, you're going to leave room for that sort of interpretation. And even though you didn't intend, perhaps, for the video to come off that way, the impact of that video was very much that.
Okay, you're the first.
And also, based on that particular interaction, by the way, I would be willing to bet a hefty sum of money that woman was either a bot or she was just messing with him. She wasn't interested, and she was fucking with him. Right? Those would be my most likely conclusions.
Did you watch the video?
Absolutely.
You did? Okay. I mean, I don't know how you're going to argue that chick in that video was a bot. I mean, she was very much writing like a human, and I don't see any evidence that she was fucking with him. I think she was just flirting and teasing him a little bit. But okay, that's a whole different thing in itself.
If a woman talked like that to me, I would immediately stop talking to her because it would be very obvious to me that she's not interested.
Okay, well, you're entitled to stop talking to anyone who you want.
And that's what I would recommend. If a woman messages you asking you for money like that, she either just wants your money, in which case, hey, if you want to give it to her, then great, or she's not interested with you and she's fucking with you, so you should leave her alone. Those are really the only two outcomes I see there.
Yeah, or she's teasing the guy. That's another possibility. Women tease men, they fuck with guys, and they want to see how the guy handles a quote unquote shit test. So there's many things that could be at play. Yeah. But anyway, like, we're getting extremely off topic. I want to get back into the initial thing. So again, and then we can move on to the next topic. Like, you're saying that, like this despicable type of content, but it's not even things that I'm saying. It's potential people interpretations. According to this logic, one could not make any type of content on controversial topics. We just all have to talk about very safe PC things, because otherwise it might potentially upset somebody.
Well, look, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with upsetting people, right? I think a large portion of my social media following comes from upsetting problematic men. What I'm saying is that when you attack vulnerable groups that have been historically oppressed and marginalized, it's just not a great look. When you feed into historical double standards as a means of attempting to claim that there is a new current double standard, it just doesn't hold up to logic and reasoning. Right?
So
there have been no campaigns that do harm to men for being shorter, but there have been countless campaigns that have done harm to women who are not only bigger bodied, but women who have been convinced that they are bigger bodied despite not at all being bigger bodied. And that leads to things like eating disorders and, in the most extreme cases, sickness and death. And I'm not saying that you're causing women to kill themselves. What I'm saying is that you're playing into the historical double standard that resulted in that.
Okay, I'm glad you brought it up. There has been no historical campaigns for male body shaming, because I literally found an article that's literally talks about this. Male body shaming, it's hard to be a Ken as it is a Barbie.
Where does this come from? Can I ask? What is the source?
Yeah, we can go to the studies.
Excellent.
ResearchGate right here. But anyway, this is the summary right here, and it's pretty straightforward. The content concerns focus on women, barely any concern men. Male body shaming is often kept out of the picture. In spite of body shaming usually being addressed in the case of females, men share more or less similar characteristics of body image with women. Although less talked about, studies prove that like women, men too bear insecurities regarding their body image, right? So that exists as well.
Can we go back to the primary resource? That's what I'm interested in.
Sure.
My first main question would be, who's doing the body shaming?
This is from University of Victoria.
No, but what I'm saying, when men are shamed for not looking like a Ken doll, right? Who's doing that shaming?
Women and other men.
Is there evidence of, let's say, I don't know, women-owned enterprises have gone over campaigns that are designed to make men look like a Barbie doll? Like, for example, what you would see with like the Thin is Beautiful campaign for women.
Yeah, there's bodybuilding competitions where you have to look like a Greek god. Yeah.
Yeah, and who put those together?
Who put those together? Men.
Yeah, who are the people who put that together? Right, powerful men.
Why does that matter for the existence of male body shaming?
I will tell you, and I think that will lead us perfectly into the second topic. Our patriarchal society harms both men and women, and I think that that's something that a lot of folks on your side of the spectrum of discussion tend to forget. I think that a lot of the time, folks like you view the patriarchy as anti-woman, and it only hurts women, and it only props up men, and that's just simply not true. The patriarchy is harmful to both men and women because of the unrealistic and ultimately immeasurable standards that it sets for both parties. Now, that said, historically, the patriarchy has damaged women and robbed them of power much more so than men, but it still hurts men, which is why when we talk about male body shaming, one, it's not really talked about, but two, the perpetrators of that body shaming primarily come from men or entities that have been organized by powerful men in the past.
Okay, let's get into the second topic. And this is one issue I have with your content is that you tie literally every single thing into the patriarchy. So I think a good starting point would be for me to hear what is your definition of the patriarchy? Because I want to make sure we're actually following the same definition.
Cool. You're going to have to forgive me because much like with, our discussion of the double standard, I tend to avoid single sentence definitions. I think that they're myopic. I think that they're closed-minded. So we can understand the patriarchy as a powerful, and I'm going to use a word here that I'm not sure you've heard, but I'm happy to define it, hegemonic. Hegemonic is silent, unquestioned power, right? So the patriarchy has crafted a societal of hegemonic control, right? That affords men opportunities to advance and succeed and exist with greater ease than women. Now, super important caveat to that definition. And I have a quote that I want to draw from here. This comes from a book called Power, Patriarchy, and Abusive Messages. The quote reads, "Patriarchy is not responsible for an individual husband's violent action toward his wife. It does, however, create an environment ripe for abuse. A weakened immune system does not create the virus that leads to deadly infection, but it provides the environment in which the virus can thrive and do its killing." So we must understand the patriarchy as an environmental, systemic feature that is not necessarily the responsibility of any one given person. Does that help?
Yeah. And then would you say that this system is designed to exclude women?
Can you maybe rephrase the question, or can you what do you mean when you say exclude?
Is it designed to keep women from positions of power or from success?
I think historically we see that very much the patriarchy does in fact keep women from positions
What about
of power.
at this point in time?
I think at this point in time, we are making good progress in terms of women ultimately becoming more equitable in society and standing. But all you have to do, for example, is look at our congressional representatives, look at our Senate, look at our local and elected officials, and you will see an overwhelming male majority, and also you will see an even more unbelievably massive majority if you include past Congresses. This is the most diverse Congress of all time, and it is still overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly white, much more so than represented in the national demographics.
Which you believe is as a result of a system that is designed to exclude women. Is that correct?
I think that what I just said perfectly answers your question.
It doesn't, because I'm trying to figure out why because that leads us to the question of why there's not more women in positions of power. And my question is it because, and there could be multiple reasons for that. There could be genetic reasons, there could be cultural reasons, or there could be this overarching system, which is, what people imply when they say patriarchy, that is designed to make it a lot harder for women.
Okay. I'm going to go with options 2 and 3.
Okay. 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 All right. And so who do you, in your opinion or whatever, who do you think is responsible? Like who sets up this system? Who set up this system?
Well, if you're asking me, is there like a man in a black hat, like running around being like, man, like this woman's not going to make it to be the principal of the school. And like this woman over here, she's never going to become an astronaut. No such man exists, right? Like I said, it's not a question of which individuals have set this up. It's how can we explore history as a means of understanding the ways in which this system was designed and executed to exclude women. For example, who is responsible for the fact that women didn't get to vote for the first like 150 years that this country existed? Can you name a person? Well, it wasn't necessarily any one person, right? It was the people who crafted our Constitution, who were drawing from their Western patriarchal society that also did not allow women to hold power. Like this goes very far back, especially in Western society, also Eastern, but especially in Western society. So it's very difficult for me to provide to you like a name or like
not a name, but a group. Like we can say that up until no, like we can say up until 60 years ago, it was largely Congress and the government system in place that kept women from having the right to vote. Right? Like you don't have to give me a name, but you can give me like a group more or less. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what you believe is the cause of this. Because if we don't know what the cause is, then how can we fix it?
Well, yeah. So I would argue that the cause of our current situation is previous situations, right? Our history. I see your dog. You got a very cute dog.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, okay. I would say our history informs where we lie now.
But there's a lot of things that we used to do historically that we don't do anymore.
Absolutely. Which is why we're getting better. It's why this current Congress, for example, is the most diverse Congress, the Congress that is still the most populated by women, but it's still male dominated in a way that you wouldn't expect to see because women make up 50% roughly of the population, as do men. And so if you were to let the chips fall, right, if you were to just reach into a hat, statistically, you would expect equal representation of women and men, but we don't get that. And there's a couple of different
this assumes that men and women are completely equal from a biological perspective. But what if men and women are not equal from a biological perspective?
Well, what you would need to do is you would need to provide evidence that demonstrates that men are better leaders, better at decision making, better at campaigning than are women. And then once we got that evidence, what we would need to do is probe it and find out what the roots of that evidence are. Is it that there is a biological difference that makes men more, electable than women? Or is it a sociocultural thing where we have traditionally been programmed to simply view men as leaders? Can I give you like an anecdotal example?
Huh? Yeah.
So I haven't taught this class in quite some time, but when I teach small group communication, when we talk about leadership, I do an exercise with my students. And I sit them down and I say, I want you to don't talk to anybody. But what I want you to do is I just want you to draw a leader. Show me what a leader looks like. I don't care what they're leading in. They could be a doctor or a lawyer or a politician. Show me what a leader looks like. And overwhelmingly, both the young men and young women in my class, they draw a man. Now, why is that? Is it because men are genetically superior to women? Or is it because we have been taught that men should be in leadership? Is it because we have seen men in leadership historically and just assume that to be the norm? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. See, here's my big problem with how you everything that involves you talking about the patriarchy. You oversimplify this issue. You exclude a lot of factors that are not favorable in your conclusion. And I'm going to go much more in depth on this. And you make it seem like something that's really not. So basically, the assumption when one evokes patriarchy is that men are united in keeping women down, right? That's sort of the assumption that anyone gets when someone invokes the patriarchy. But that doesn't really work from an evolutionary perspective, because men are largely competing against each other. And I didn't even think of that. That's a quote from Dr. David Buss, who's a very famous evolutionary psychologist. So let me give you my version of what I think is actually going on. I think there's many factors at play. Yes, I do think there's some social factors that are responsible for the unequal distribution of power amongst men. However, I think it's extremely disgenuine to just say that it's social factors. I think there's also biological factors, and I can pull up many studies on that. I also think
wait, pull them up. Pull them up.
Okay. Hang on one second. Let me share my screen.
Believe me, I know what it's like to try and like pull up a study. When someone says pull up a study, take your time, no rush.
I got it. In what's said to be the largest study examining difference between sexes, a long-time stereotype is holding some water. The Telegraph reports that research University of Cambridge tested more than 670,000 people and found when it comes to empathy, the ability to gauge how others are feeling and what they're thinking about, women have more of it. And that guys view the world more through a logic, rules-based system. The men and women empathy study, blah, blah, blah. But basically the conclusion of the study is that women are better when things that come to empathy, which makes sense, and men are better at analytical, logical things, which would make sense why much more men gravitate towards STEM fields and why much more women gravitate towards things like HR, right, which is something that requires empathy. So this has been like, there's a lot of studies that suggest the brain differences between men and women.
Wait, I'm so sorry. That study right there, that suggests no biological differences at all. It just says that women are better at empathizing and men tend to think more logically.
Why? How? Yeah, they think more logically. Why?
So this is are you familiar with Occam's razor?
I've heard the term, but okay, talk about it.
Occam's razor is just like a fancy way of saying like sometimes the simplest explanation is the most effective. So what do you think is a more reasonable explanation? One, there is a biological difference that I see no evidence in this study for that programs men's brain from birth to be better at logic than women and vice versa for women to be better at logic than men. Or alternatively, might it be that women are conditioned to be more empathetic because historically women have been the caregivers, women have been the childbearers, men have been the laborers, and that those sociocultural factors ultimately produce the differences that are observed in a study like this. Because I'll grant you that the data are pretty darn clear that women are better at empathy, women are better at producing and reading the emotions of other people, right? And that men tend to be a little bit better in terms of reaching conclusions based on messages that are delivered by other people. I would submit.
You would say those are all social, right?
I'm saying what I would submit is that there are no biomarkers that contribute to that difference. And if there are such biomarkers that do contribute to the difference, that the role that they play is extremely tiny.
Which goes back to the issue I have with the way you describe patriarchy, because you blame every single thing on social conditioning and society, and you ignore the biological differences and some of the other differences. You're
going to need to show me evidence of the biological differences.
Okay, I'd be happy to. Let me pull up another study.
Make it happen.
I mean, are you claiming that there's no biological differences in terms of the brain between a man and a woman? Is that the claim?
I think that there are some documented differences in terms of the way that men and women's brains function. In terms of things like who has the power, who has been elected, who has been influential, I don't see the connection there, nor have I ever seen any sort of evidence connects those things.
I mean, I think there's a whole bunch. Female had a greater volume of prefrontal cortex or orbital cortex. So this basically just talks about this. They did an MRI.
If women have a greater prefrontal cortex, that's like the part of the brain that is for decision making. So that would make them more logical than men.
The point I am making with this study is that there's some biological differences between a man's brain and a woman's brain. I think you have to concede that the man's brain is not the same as a woman's brain.
I think that there are some minor differences that exist between men and brains women. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that those minor differences are not capable of explaining why historically men have existed in positions of power with such more, right? Because if you look historically, only men ran shit. Right.
Well, that's not even true. Look at Elizabeth the Great, look at Joan of Arc. There has been women in positions of power, so that's not even true.
But Joan of Arc was a radical feminist who was executed by men for being a revolutionary woman. Joan of Arc is
she was in a position of power for a period of time. Back then, they used to execute everyone. Okay, Elizabeth the First, Queen Victoria.
Yeah. I'm not going to say that no women have ever been in positions of power, but historically, the proportion of women and men who have been in power is undeniably swayed in favor of men. And it would appear that you're trying to make the argument that there is some sort of biological predictor of that imbalance. And what I'm saying is I've never seen evidence that supports that. Now, there used to be this old evolutionary theory. It was called trait theory. And it said that certain traits produce a better leader. Right now, that trait theory has since been debunked and disbanded, because what we found is that there are no inborn traits that necessarily make someone a better leader. It has much more to do with one's acculturation and what one is taught and one's position as they enter the world. Right. So I am not trying to say that men and women are completely identical biologically. That is a fool's errand. You will never catch me saying that. What I'm saying is that the differences that exist are not capable of explaining the historical power imbalance that has existed between men and women.
Well, which leads me, that's perfect, because that leads me to the next thing that I'm going to cite, which is responsible for that difference. And again, I'm agreeing that culture and society is a part of it. I just don't think it's 95% of it like you think it is. Let me pull this up. So this is also from David Buss. This is was actually a really good read. Okay.
David Buss is a foundational evolutionary scholar.
Yeah, he's a very interesting fellow. So you can see this is a massive, this is like, well, actually this is, I think this is a short version of it. But basically what this talks about, and then you can kind of read it, but basically what this talks about is that the big reason for why there is a discrepancy between men and women in positions of power has to do with the dating strategy that men and women have and employ. So, for example, women are attracted largely to successful men. Thus, men, in order to maximize their sexual dating strategy, really focus on getting in those positions of power. There's also a big difference how men and women on average budget their time. Women spend more time dedicated to other areas of life, like family, like relationships, and men spend much more of their time working. And that is also a big thing for why there's a discrepancy in positions of power versus men. Generally speaking, they don't really care about a woman being in power. They're just a woman who looks good and who is, cool, right? So that is also the dual mating strategy is a huge component for why there's this discrepancy between men and women in positions of power.
Right. Okay. So I'm not necessarily opposed to much of what you said there, but I need you to understand that what you just said there has absolutely nothing to do with biology. It's all social. Everything that you just described.
I never said it did, but this is I said I said there was multiple reasons, and this is one of them.
Okay. Absolutely. There are 100%. There are many, 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 many reasons why men tend to find themselves in greater positions of power than women. I would argue that a shockingly large number of those reasons can be traced back to patriarchal design. You seem to be saying that there are biological differences.
I'm saying there's biological reasons. I'm saying that there's evolutionary dating strategy reasons, and I'm saying that there's cultural reasons. I'm saying there's a whole bunch of reasons. It's not just social, cultural. It's not just this conspiracy of men who are just trying to keep women down. I'm saying there's a whole much more to it than that. That explains why men are in positions of power. And this is a big part of it. Yes, for men, in order to be successful in dating marketplace, it is very advantageous to achieve positions of power. For women, it is not. And that explains why women and men typically budget their time for different things, right? Like women spend a lot less time working on average than men do. Is there exceptions? Of course, right? But generally speaking, that is the reason. That's one of the reasons. So, yeah.
So the follow-up question that I would ask is, why do we see that discrepancy?
Well, that's what I'm literally just answering. I'm saying that this has to do with a combination of things. It has to do with biological reasons. It has to do with different dating strategies between men and women. And if you want to solve the patriarchy, then one of the biggest things you can do is to have women not date up. Tell women that they should date men who are not in positions of power, because when they date men who are in positions of power, they're supporting the patriarchy.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So I have two things to say to that. The first thing is that if we're going to dismantle the patriarchy, for me, it doesn't make very much sense to begin at the place where women cannot get into positions of power, because like it or not, right, one of the ways in which women can find themselves in influential positions is by taking advantage of the structure that boosts men into power and then leveraging that to do good, right? We've seen that with, you know, people who have been in relationships with very powerful celebrities and judges and lawyers, right? And they leverage that to do a ton of good that they would not have been able to do
Is that the only way you think a woman can get in a position of power?
Oh, absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that we should not start our dismantling of the patriarchy with the portion of it that benefits women. That doesn't make any sense to me. And the second thing that I'll say here is that another good citation that you're welcome to look up to, you're welcome to look up, is it's by, oh boy, here's another name that I really hope I'm not mispronouncing. This is by Merman and Dawn. It's from 2012. It's called Body Image and Gender Roles. And it's a great book chapter that helps to, in a way that would take much too long for me to do, it helps to unpack the ways in which the patriarchy places women in subordinate roles, allowing ultimately, to harken back to our first topic, allowing ultimately for the normalization and desensitization regarding the critique of their bodies. And just to wrap this all up in a bow, I think that's some of the reason why men like yourself are so outraged by women, occasionally poking fun at men's height, because although doing that with larger women has been normalized historically, it's not been normalized for men until very recently. And so we're seeing that happen, and we're like, whoa, we don't want to be made fun of for our appearance, when in reality, we've been the perpetrators of that sort of behavior.
Well, you're mischaracterizing my argument. I could care less about women making fun of men's heights. I'm not even short. I'm 5'11". It doesn't affect me in any way. It doesn't outrage me in any way. What I think is pretty silly is having this double standard, which shames men for expressing their sexual preferences and doesn't shame women for expressing their sexual preferences. And this goes back to, again, to one of the problems that I see with your content, is that you seem to like bend over backwards to justify any double standard which benefits women, but not any one that benefits men, which I just think is intellectually disgenuine on your part. Like, either you can be for double standards or against double standards, but you can't be for certain double standards that are in line with your political thinking or whatever you're.
Yeah, so we shouldn't get back into that first conversation, but our fundamental disagreement remains on the nature of what is a double standard and why is it important. But in terms of the differences between men and women in terms of positions of power, right, you've still presented no evidence to me that is biological or evolutionary that illustrates why men are in positions of power. And all I'm trying to argue is that the system that we have set up right now, which I think you would be hard pressed to deny, puts men in positions of power over women, that system has been historically and socioculturally set up by powerful, wealthy men. Here in the Western states, we're talking about powerful, wealthy white men, right? And that it positions women, especially women from communities of color, in lower roles.
Well, I think if you're going to disband the patriarchy, assuming that David Buss's work is true, which I very much believe it is, you would have to do something about the fact that women, generally speaking, prefer to date men in positions of power. You can't solve the patriarchy until you do something about that.
Yeah, so I agree. I 100% agree with that. And I think that we have, as a society, made a number of steps to do that. For example, women's suffrage, granting women the power of choice with Roe v. Wade, allowing women to take out loans for mortgages. These are all tangible steps that we've taken that allow for women to become more independent, more financially stable, and therefore not rely on men. And what are we seeing? We are seeing far fewer marriages that are initiated by men. We are seeing far more divorces. And of course, a lot of what you might refer to as men's rights activists complain about that. And they say, oh, the traditional family is falling apart. Well, what's happening is that we are very slowly dismantling the elements of the patriarchy that prevented women from success. And this is the fallout, because now men have to rely on more than just their power, status, and wealth to acquire, right? Or get, as you would say, to get women.
Well, we revoked every in the U.S. We revoked every legal whatever disadvantage women had in the early 70s. It was done mid 70s, maybe at the latest. So that hasn't been a case. We haven't had any legal disadvantages for women in the last 50 years, with a possible exception of Roe versus Wade now being overturned. So yeah, I don't know how. So that's been done for 50 years already.
Right. So I'll explain how that affects today. Right. It's very simple. First of all, there's still a group of very powerful men and women who are desperate to maintain patriarchal design. Right. These are often people who describe themselves as family first, as Christian. They're often white. They're often very anti-LGBTQ plus. And what they do is they attempt to enact legislation, start social causes, and create culture wars that ultimately harm women, and even more so women of color. Like you said, the fact that Roe v. Wade, which has been established for 50 years, is at risk of being torn down right now. Right. And so that should be evidence of the presence of the patriarchy in 2022. But also we can understand that although right now, for example, it's federally legal to get an abortion, or it's federally legal for women to get a loan, it wasn't 50 years ago. And so the women who raised children who were born then, they were born, if they were born, for example, to a single mother, they were born with less advantages, and that affects their life cycle, which affects their kids' life cycle. And it's a constant game of catch up, which is problematic. I'm not offering solutions. I'm just saying that it's there.
Right, but you said it's a certain amount of men and women in positions of power. If it is men and women in positions of power, that by default makes it non-patriarchal, because a patriarchy is a system in which men hold the power.
Much in the way that you might go to Alabama and see a black man flying a Confederate flag, you might go into Congress and see a woman like Lauren Boebert, who vehemently opposes a woman's right to choose, right? Internalized misogyny exists. Internalized patriarchy exists, just like internalized racism and colorism exists.
Well, first of all, if you go to the Congress, you see people like Nancy Pelosi who have massive amounts of power. So, yeah, I don't even know where to start with that. Second of all, do you think that maybe just because they disagree with you on these issues doesn't make them misogynistic? Like, they just disagree with you on your interpretation of reality?
Sure. Well, there's a difference, right, between disagreeing with somebody on like a topic of discussion, like, my favorite color is blue, your favorite color is red. There's a difference between that and saying, I don't believe that a woman should have control over what happens to her body, or I don't believe that we should talk about or give what's the word I'm looking for? Validity to the existence of queer people in this country. That hurts people badly. Right. And the individuals who are in line with that are the same individuals, mostly, who reiterate and practice patriarchal norms.
I think they're just a bunch of religious weirdos. I don't really think most people.
Yes, absolutely. The tie between religion, specifically Christianity, patriarchy, and white supremacy is very real. So I'm glad that you acknowledge.
But if you want to talk about the tie between religion, okay, so let's see if you're going to be intellectually consistent. If you want to talk about the tie between patriarchy and religion, then the one you should really bring up is Islam, because that one is like 100 times worse in terms of that than Christianity is. So will you acknowledge that?
Worse, or are they both just awful?
No, Islam is a lot worse.
Like in which ways?
Like, look at Saudi Arabia. Women literally can't legally drive a car. They can get beheaded for walking down the street without their whatever thing. That doesn't happen in America.
Are you familiar with the Western country that disrupted the power structures in Saudi Arabia about 50, 60 years ago? That was us. We did that. We did that there. We did that in all parts of Africa. We did that in all parts of South America. And people love to talk about Nicaragua. We did that. The United States did that, operated by the CIA. It's unfortunate. I mean,
okay, that's a whole thing in of itself. But are you going to argue that Islam is just as pro-women as Christianity is?
I think that they are both horrifically anti-women in practice, but not in scripture.
Actually,
that's not true. I think that in many ways they're anti-women in scripture, but less so in practice. than in
one
private.
is a lot worse.
In your opinion, one is a lot worse, and I would argue that your opinion is misinformed because you have been, you have given credence to Western exceptionalism. Their religion is the bad one. Our religion is the good one. You don't talk about.
I'm not really. I knew you were going to say that.
The Spanish Inquisition. You don't talk about things like the correction camps, right? The Christian correction camps that we have here that tortured, right? LGBTQ youth. We don't talk about the Mayan genocide. We don't talk about the Native American genocide. We don't talk about the Alaskan and Canadian genocide. That we did that in the name of the Christian God.
I knew you were going to say that.
Your dog agrees with me.
But no, dude. Like, first of all, I'm not religious at all. I could care less. I think all the religions are pretty dumb, equally dumb. I don't know which one is dumber. I don't know. That's like
that's what I'm saying. That's what you're just agreeing with me now.
No. But no, I'm saying that I personally think all religions are dumb. However, one religion is a lot worse in terms of patriarchy and sexism than the other, and that is Islam. Like, look at the laws that exist in Islamic countries compared to the laws that exist in Christian countries. Like, there's a pretty big difference there.
Yeah, so I would argue that the progressive laws that exist in this country exist in spite of Christianity, right? Because if you look at the way that women were treated up until very recently, when I say very recently, I really just mean the last 80 years, 100 years or so. I mean, 150 years ago, a man, I could purchase a 12-year-old as my bride, okay? I could do that not that long ago. So I understand that that's still happening in some developing countries, and we should be very grateful that that no longer happens here. But to compare what's happening in the moment now in some primarily Muslim countries versus what's happening here in the moment right now in this country, which, although we claim not to have an official religion, is very much a Christian nation, we neglect the massive genocide, right, that occurred in the name of the Christian God, the torturing, the colonization, right, the invasion that we did, that the Western folks did in the name of the Christian God.
Okay.
And I'm not apologizing for Islam, right? I'm not apologizing for Islam. I'm saying that the Abrahamic religions are deeply problematic in the same way.
Okay. Fundamentally disagree with you on that, but I think we're getting into a whole different debate. So
should we move on to our last topic?
Yeah, let's move on to topic number 3. That's the net effect of my content versus net effect of your content. And I guess this is what I find problematic about your content. You can say what you find problematic about my content. I feel like even though I think your intentions are good, your intention is to help groups that have been marginalized. I think you're doing them a big disservice with a lot of perpetuating a lot of victim mindsets. So I'll give you an analogy. If I had a friend who was an alcoholic, right? I think that while it would be nicer for me to say, well, dude, like you don't have a drinking problem, man. You just have a different drinking preference than I do. I would be doing him or her a big disservice by saying that and not just being like, dude, yeah, you have a drinking problem. In the same way that I see you kind of bend over backwards to rationalize overweight women as, just having a different body type. Like, do I think you should be mean to them? No, of course not. They should be treated with respect and dignity. However, you're not doing them any favors with the kind of philosophy you perpetuate, and you'd be much better off saying, yeah, you probably would be a lot healthier and better off if you lost some weight, right? So that's kind of the problem I have, I would say, overall with your content.
Okay, so
I think it hurts the people that's trying to help.
So question for you there. When it comes to, I don't even want to only talk about overweight people. Let's just talk about unhealthy people in general. People who are unhealthy. Do you think that they are like unaware that they're unhealthy? Do you think that they just like have no idea?
Really depends on the person in question. But I think some of them go out of their way to do mental gymnastics to justify their current state of existence. And I've seen this.
But what I asked was, do you think that they're just totally ignorant of their health issues?
Really depends on the person.
Okay, I'll answer for you. I'll say no. They're aware, right? Bigger bodied women are aware that they're bigger bodied. They are told so every day, right? Society shows them images of what women should look like, right? They are sometimes harassed on the street. They are sometimes harassed on social media. And they are very well aware that they have bigger bodies than the quote unquote average American woman. So if they are aware, and then you unprompted come up and say, hey, that lady over there, here's how to make sure you don't end up with her, that's going to hurt people. That is going to hurt people's feelings, and it's also going to placate men who have a predisposition to be abusive to women, which is why, as I scrolled through the comments, I'm not saying that you're abusive to women, but as I scrolled through the comments of our last debate, you can take a look at the things that people were saying about me and the things that people were saying about women. They were not pleasant.
Dude, this same logic, you can take a look at any one of my videos and you can see the extremely negative things that people say about me and about men in general. So
yeah, and I would argue that the reason that that's happening is because you, unprompted, have, for lack of a better term, started the fight. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily right for them to meet fire with fire. That's not for me to say, although a controlled burn can stop a forest fire. What I'm saying is that it is you who are instigating. And in my opinion, you have at least somewhat of an idea of what you're doing, and you are masquerading it as this is just my preference. Right? I think enough women have told you that what you're saying is nasty and rude and harmful to women for the message to have gotten through. You just don't care.
Well, I don't care about hurting. Wait, hang on. I don't care about hurting some random person's on TikTok's feelings who is extremely nasty to me and tells me to go kill myself. Yes, I don't really care about that person that much, but I am pretty open to a good, solid argument. I think that the initial video, I've only ever in my history of my TikTok done one video that talks about the weight thing, one video. And in that video, all I expressed was my preference for not wanting to date overweight women, which I think is pretty common amongst men. Again, I know there's exceptions, but generally speaking, that's a pretty common preference. So no, I don't see how I'm going out there and spreading hate or encouraging hate. No, I'm expressing my personal preference, which I'm allowed to have.
You are 100% allowed to have that, but
just not express it.
No, you're fundamentally free to express it, but it's going to come with consequences, right? It's going to come with people saying you're an asshole for saying that, right? And that's how you end up with a bunch of nasty, hateful people in your comments. Look, I get hate from people in my comments too. Not very often. I don't get people telling me to kill myself. If there were large groups of people telling me to kill myself based on my opinions, thoughts, and ideology, I would really rethink the things that I'm saying. I'd spend a lot of time being like, why did 12 people send me a death threat today, right? And I'm not talking about a death threat just for existing, because we know that like our friends in the LGBTQ plus community, they get death threats simply for existing. I'm talking about for expressed ideology.
Yeah, that doesn't really prove anything to me. There's a bunch of random bitter haters. I also get 1,200 positive comments and emails and GMs from people, men and women, who've been positively impacted by my work. So yeah, some random haters on TikTok is not going to be enough for me to reconsider my message.
Okay, well, what about someone like me who's come up on here? I've given you a list of scholarly resources that help explain my position and my opinion. Each time you've tried to make a claim and I've asked you for evidence, you really haven't been able to give me a whole lot. You've been able to show me some studies, but those studies didn't prove the things that you were saying. Maybe could you consider that a couple of the things that you've assumed about the general relations between men and women might not fully be accurate? You might only have part of the picture in those instances.
What scholarly evidence did you show during this debate?
Well, there was the sources that I brought up, the quotes that I gave, the list of resources that I gave you. As I mentioned, I didn't get to use all of them, right? There were a few. But it is the demonstration of, for example, the prevalence of the patriarchy, right? I can recommend and did recommend a number of chapters, books, and studies that articulate that, in a much more detailed and nuanced way, because it's a detailed, nuanced conversation.
Right, but what's happened is every time I brought up a study, you've like nitpicked little things that you don't like about it.
No, we don't nitpick it. I asked you
brought up any studies on the screen.
See, here's the thing. I don't want to sound rude, but it's the difference between somebody who has a decade of training in research methods and someone who just doesn't. And it's no shade at all.
This is a pure argument of authority, though. It's like, I have
No,
more
but it's
training
not,
than you. That means I'm right.
So no, it's not argument of authority, because what's happening is you're bringing to me like a study like the David Buss study as evidence of biological differences for power structures between men and women. And what I said is that article does not use biological evidence to make that claim. You were unable to demonstrate that there is evidence of such a claim. And so we moved on to the next subject. That's not argument.
Let's see again, like the David Buss study wasn't brought up by me to demonstrate biological differences. It was to talk about the other factor, which is a dual mating strategy. The study before that was for the biological differences.
Yeah, but so there are biological differences between the brain, but there is no link between those biological differences and power systems in society, which is the point that I was trying to make. You were unable to demonstrate evidence to the counter, and that's how research works, right? You sit down and you say, is there research to support the causal claim that I've made? There is not. So we move on to the next topic.
Right, but you haven't been able to demonstrate that that these patriarchal systems are a result of purely social conditions or history. You haven't been able to show that either. So by this logic, then we both haven't succeeded.
Well, so again, I've recommended some books and article chapters, right, which would take much longer to read. And so it's kind of like you said to me, you don't have to take my word for it, right? I've given you the full list of my citations, and you can explore them at your leisure. And what you will find, I think, at the end of that reading is that you have a much more complete idea of what the patriarchy can and does look like.
Right, but then everyone in the audience is supposed to basically take your word for it that these mythical, okay, I won't even say mythical, these scholarly articles are going to come to the conclusions that you will, that you want them to, right? Like no one, like how is that a practical argument? Like me, I have to show all my studies on the screen and we nitpick them together. But you can just quote a random book that I don't have access to that
you do access. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you have access to all the PDFs. Would you like to bring one up right now?
Which one?
Excuse me. Well, it depends on what we're talking about. Double standards?
Yeah, let's do it.
Double standards? Okay. Let's take a look at a document. One of the things we were talking about with double standards is I was trying to historically contextualize them. And so one of the things you may remember is that I said that there are a number of double standards out there that hurt men, right? And one of them is that men are shamed for being virgins, whereas women are, on the other hand, shamed for being childlessness. Let's take a look at the virgins.
I'm not disputing that.
Oh, okay. So then you are taking me for my word.
Well, with that one thing, yeah. But with I'm going to need to see some evidence that let's just say that the patriarchy is caused by social conditions.
Okay, so let's see that quote that I read you. You remember that quote that I read you? That comes from a book called Power, Patriarchy, and Abusive Messages in Healing the Hurting, Giving Hope and Help to Abused Women. And that's edited by Catherine Clark Kroger, and James R. Beck. Right?
Let's pull it up.
Let's do it. So you need me to reread?
No, just share the screen. Like, just pull it up on your end and share the screen.
Oh, can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. 1 minute. Oh, no. All right. Drop my microphone. All right. Oh, my dog's definitely eating something that he ought not to be.
Who did you say was the woman who wrote this?
So when it comes to like larger books, you actually list the editor, not the author. So the editors are, and I've got it right here, Catherine Clark Kroger and James R. Beck. And the book title is called Healing the Hurting, Giving Help and Hope to Abused Women. And I believe the chapter in question is called Power, Patriarchy, and Abusive Messages.
Okay, pull it up.
Let's do it.
Healing the hurting, giving power.
All right, so I've found the book. I need to find the chapter now. Oh, we're going to hit a paywall. All right, let's take a look and study because I have several. Is that okay?
Sure, if it's on this topic.
If you'd like to, I can share my screen. Don't share these tips. Oh God, I have to open my system preferences. In truth, it might be faster for you to pull it up.
How do I find it?
Well, let's see. Let's take a look at. Okay, let's take a look at a study that I actually cited already when we were talking. So I want you to go to scholar.google.com.
Okay.
And let's go with, so the name of this article is Body Image and Gender Roles. And it's going to be by Merman, M-U-R-M.
Is this going to be on patriarchy though?
Yep. Most of these readings have to do with patriarchy, feminism, male supremacy, that sort of stuff.
Okay. What am I looking for?
So the title of the article is Body Image and Gender Roles.
Okay. All right.
And that's going to be by Merman, M-U-R-M-E-N, and Dawn. It's from 2012.
Okay, let me share my
And this
screen.
is a nice short chapter. Boom.
Is this it?
Let's see. Scroll down a bit. Looks like it.
Okay, where am I going?
Well, you'd have to read the article. You'd have to sit down and read the article.
Well, tell me where I'm going, right? You're quoting from this study, so all I see is
that quote came from a different citation. I don't have any quotes for this citation. This is a book chapter that helps us to better understand the ways in which women are placed into subservient roles and how those roles in subservient spaces allow for the normalization of the degrading of their bodies, which is inherently patriarchal.
Where am I going though? Like, where is this? This is longer.
You're going to scroll up and you're going to start on page 1.
Okay. What am I looking for?
First paragraph, first word.
Gender versus sex?
That's just a chapter summary. Scroll.
It only takes a simple look at children's toys to recognize their gender stereotype, cultural body ideals for women and men in North America.
Yep, keep on going.
The Bratz doll made for girls in the world, Western entertainment, action figures designed for boys exemplified with gender ideals. The Bratz doll is thin, has long hair, and a sexualized look for makeup, full lips, and revealing W figure is extremely muscular and has a facial expression and knows no fear. Although these toys represent exaggeration of gendered body image, the current depictions of ideal bodies in mass media follow these gendered patterns. In the article, we describe the current body ideals for women and men and their relationships to existing gendered roles that interlock to support patriarchal heterosexual society. Women and men who are more concerned with adherence to gender stereotype roles are more susceptible to ideal, but the women group are generally more vulnerable to the subordinate society. We discuss the possibilities. I mean, I want to see the evidence. I want to see the science, the studies. That's what I'm looking for. This is like
so all throughout this article, you're going to see a series of references that help unpack and explain everything that you just read. And so, like, this is what I'm trying to communicate to you. When we do research in the social sciences, there is no one big gotcha study where it says, boom, there's the patriarchy. You can pin it up on your wall. It revolves around that word I was saying before, hegemonic power structures, right? And so to better understand how that works, you need to be like learned in the field. You need to go out. You need to read article after article after article. You need to read classic articles. You need to read contemporary articles, and the amalgamation of all of that research and all of the chapters like these, which present a collage of that existing research, That helps us to better understand the ways in which patriarchy functions, which is why when you asked me, hey, can you define the patriarchy? I was like, I don't think you're going to like this answer because it can't be surmised in one simple sentence.
Yeah, the problem is that I don't see any kind of, if I want to like start nitpicking this, I don't see any kind of studies at all. All I see is someone expressing their opinion, honestly. I don't see any kind of science or studies to support this. So, yeah,
So
that
what kind
would,
of science studies were you looking for?
well, something that would show that the reason that women are not in positions of power is largely cultural or
Yeah,
historical.
so this chapter explains one of the many ways in which that's true.
Right, but where's the science? Where's the studies?
Scrolling down. And scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. And so you'll see a reference list. And those are the studies referenced in this article. Those studies draw from other studies, which reference, again, other studies. And so this is the way that science and research works, right? So like I said, you're never going to locate one study that says, we tested to see if the patriarchy exists, and our results demonstrated empirical proof that the patriarchy exists in the year 2022. It's not like that. It involves dedication. It involves a lot of reading. And it also involves the proper training necessary to understand qualitative, quantitative, and rhetorical research.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, again, like we have to just take your word for it that the science and the studies exist because
they're there. They're listed there. You just need to do the due diligence of reading into them.
But you're the one that's trying to prove that this stuff exists, so you have to be able to.
And I have directed you to the evidence. Whether or not you choose to engage with that evidence,
you've directed me to a bunch of random.
No, these are not random. These are peer-reviewed, scholastic.
A bunch of random. Okay, fine.
It's not random. You are random, Alex. I don't mean that as an insult.
I don't even know what that means.
With no training, with no expertise, claiming to know how relationships work. In reality, this is what the science of relationships looks like. It's not glamorous. It's not controversial. It's
well, I would argue that that when it comes to dating, you can't learn dating skills from reading a book or reading a bunch of studies. You have to learn dating from going out.
In your videos, I hear you talking about things like game, right? I hear you talking. What's that acronym? Sexual value something something. Where do you think those come from? Those come from books. Those come from books written by dudes.
I'm not completely dismissing books. Like I've read a lot of books in my time. I'm not like anti-science or something like that. What I'm saying is if you want to learn dating skills, you have to go out there and talk to women. You can't learn it from reading a book or reading a bunch of studies. That's just how it works.
What I'm trying to say is if you want to understand if you want to understand how your content exists within and supports the patriarchy, this is the legwork that you need to do. Now, if you refuse that work, you can continue operating along your merry way. I'm not going to stop you, but I will call you on stuff when you say incorrect stuff, right? I'm not saying that if you want to get into a relationship, hey, fellas, if you want to get into a relationship, you know what you got to do? You got to go on Google Scholar with your lady and you got to show her. No, of course not. That's crazy, right? That's silly. What I'm saying is that the advice that you provide to men in terms of dating runs counter to the science of relationships and also props up patriarchal design as evidenced by this study, as well as the other 20 studies that I provided to you before this discussion.
The studies that you can pull up, the studies that you're telling me I have to do all the legwork on.
Here's one. Yeah, you need to do legwork in order to learn. I'm so sorry.
But if you're the one, all right, there's no need to get condescending. If you're the one that's trying to argue for your argument is that, the patriarchy is largely as a result of historical and social issues, then you have to be able to prove that. You can't just be like, well, I need you to go do the legwork and then you can prove it to yourself. That's not how a debate works.
Well, no, I'm not. Look, I'm not asking you to jump headfirst into a random series of articles. I have conglomerated the articles, some of the articles that help illustrate my point.
But you haven't been able to show me one clear-cut study. That's the thing.
Right. And as I tried to explain, it's not about finding one exact study that proves my point. If you want to take a look at one study that proves the point that I was talking about, we could take a look at, for example, the ways that women are shamed for, I don't know, childlessness, the difference between men and women in sexting. Is that like a cool topic that you'd like to dig into?
No, because I agree with you on all those things.
Well, then I don't know what to say. If you're fine with the thing,
I want to see a study that proves that the patriarchy is caused largely, if not entirely, by social and historical reasons. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. That request results from an incomplete understanding of what the word proof means. I'm so, like there is no I'm gonna test to see if the patriarchy exists. That's just not how it works.
But so then why am I held to a much higher standard than you? Why am I held to a much higher standard of proof than you are?
Because you said that there are biomarkers, which are highly specific. You said that there are biomarkers.
And you said that this is all largely social and historical reasons.
Yes, and I can point to a bevy of resources that I have provided to you, which illustrate that.
Oh, dude, okay. So I can also do that. I'd be like, oh, dude, yeah, in the footnotes over there, but you have to do your own leg note, your own leg work. Like, how is that?
I'm happy to do that. I'm more than happy to do that. And we did do that with a couple of your studies, and they did not show what you claimed them to show.
No, only one of them didn't claim to show what you interpreted it to show, which was the one about the biomarkers. The study that I pulled up showed that, there's a difference between how men and women, in terms of what their strengths in their brain are. You just weren't happy with that study.
No, I was perfectly fine with that study. What you said is that those biological differences result in men being in power more so than women. And I said there's no evidence of that, and you are unable to provide evidence of that.
You said that, okay, so that hang on. Now we're going like 5 different circles. You're saying that the studies I showed, yeah, because if a man is more predisposed to, okay, can you agree with my thought, my logical process here, that if a man has some biomarker that makes him more predetermined to gravitate towards analytical fields and be successful at it, that would give him an advantage when it comes to getting into position of power? Yes or no?
I would need you to show me evidence of that causal relationship. You're proposing a causal relationship. You're saying A leads to B.
So you don't think that could play a role? You don't think that the analytical?
I'm open to it. But what I would argue is that the propensity that men have toward logic and the propensity that women have toward nurturing behaviors are taught, and that it is not the result of biomarkers.
Right. Your argument is that this is all largely social and historical. That is your argument.
Yeah, and I strongly believe that if you read about the sex differences that exist between men and women, you will see caveat after caveat after caveat where the authors say these differences are largely due to sociocultural factors, or they'll say something like there's no way to prove whether or not this is due to biological factors.
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, you can't hold me to a completely different standard of showing proof than you are willing to do. Like, you haven't shown me any proof during the course of this debate. That you've just shown me a bunch of citations. You haven't shown me like a bunch of like clear-cut proof that I can see who wrote this, how the experiment was done, how the study was conducted. That is what I want to see.
But that's what I'm trying to tell you. There's no experiment to test for the patriarchy. There is no such study. That's crazy.
So then neither one of our hypotheses can be proven then.
I'm not making a hypothesis. I'm trying to explain a socio-cultural structure. And again, and I don't want to sound condescending, this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between like quantitative methods, like experimental design, which is quantitative methods, and the historical, societal, and socio-cultural positioning of women throughout our existence. That is not provable with any one specific study. That requires, decades and archives and encyclopedias of work and research.
Okay, so if it's not,
I think this is the. I'm sorry to interrupt. I think this is the fundamental disagreement that we have here, which is that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it would seem to me like you believe that the problems of the world, at least in dating, can be solved by engaging in a specific series of interactions that are designed to produce a very specific result. What I would argue is that that's too narrow. That's too myopic. We need to instead be looking at the system of dating and unpacking why does it exist in this way. And that simply requires a lot more. Like I'm looking at broad pictures. You seem to be focused on individual interactions.
Well, the goal of my channel is to help individual people improve their dating life. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not a congressman. I'm not trying to address broader social issues. But I certainly don't think that you can address macro social issues with my followers making micro changes. No, I definitely don't think that. But again, going back to this is like, you are holding me to a completely different level of standard than you. You're saying that, well, in order to understand my evidence, you have to do 10 years worth of research and go to school. But your evidence, man. That's basically the argument is, I can't show you my evidence right now because you have to go to school for 10 years and really study this to see my evidence.
Dude, I'm so sorry to say this. That's why I'm the expert. Because I did the work. Because I teach the classes, because I do the research, because you come to me with half of one study by David Buss, and I come to you with a list of 20 citations. That's the difference. And like, there's no way for me to say that without sounding like a pretentious douchebag. I get that, and I deserve to be maligned for it. It's a character flaw. I'm working on it. But the thing that I can't stand to see is men who come on social media who believe that their identity, their existence, their penis gives them the right to be an expert in a field that they're not an expert in. That is my primary beef. If your channel was like, I read this really cool study done by these authors, here's what they found, and if in that article you maybe misinterpreted some of the data, I would be able to say, actually, it was more like this and it was more like that, and we could learn and grow together. But that's not what you're doing. You're doing things like, say this if a girl to see if a girl is giving you a shit test. A shit test is not a thing. It's just not. It's from the movie Hitch. It does not exist. It was made up by Hollywood producers. Will Smith made it up. It's fabricated.
So women don't shit test men, in your opinion?
Shit testing does not exist. You can fuck with someone. You can manipulate someone, right? And there's plenty of data that shows that. But the idea of like the shit test is a thing that women do to men, and there's proof of it. No such proof exists, my guy. You may think it exists. You may have seen what you perceive to be that. But at least from my ontological perspective, there's just no evidence.
Okay,
and
so
anecdotal evidence is not sufficient.
Let's dissect what you said. There's two things. Yeah. First of all, again, you keep sticking with the argument of authority, which is it's like,
not the argument of authority if I have the research.
I'm the expert. I've gone to school. I've done the research. So listen to me. Yeah. Don't listen to the guy that doesn't have the qualifications I would like them to have. That's the first problem with your argument. The second problem is a lot of this stuff, like dating, it cannot be learned in a school, reading books. It cannot be learned from any of that stuff. It is learned by going out there and talking to girls and interacting with girls and getting tons and tons of experience. It is further learned from having hundreds of clients who've done those things and learning from those experiences. That is how you learn dating skills. You don't learn dating skills from reading a study or reading a book.
So a couple of things, and this first one's going to seem petty, but I would appreciate it if, when we're talking about like men and women, if we use the word men and women, because the word girl is infantilizing and it's potentially problematic. So if we could just treat women like adults, right? Because a girl is a child, right? So if we could treat women like women, that would be helpful. But independent of that, it's not that you don't have the qualifications that I would prefer. It's that you are not qualified, period, end of sentence. And I'm sure that your dating life
according to your opinion.
I mean, what certifications, what qualifications, what training, what expertise do you have other than the fact that you've interacted with women in your own lived experience?
Okay, can you explain to me what course or what qualifications someone gets in order to be good with ladies? Like, where do you study this? Where did you study your lady skills? Please explain that to me.
Yeah, no, to your point, one good way to learn how to date is to go out and to do it. But what you're doing is you're giving generalized relationship advice based on nothing more than your opinion. You are not leveraging the data. You are not leveraging research. You are not leveraging any sort of training or expertise, and it's reckless.
No, I don't think it's reckless at all. I think it's much more reckless to sit in like a little ivory tower and speculate on random theories that you read about in books and just think that everything applies like that without having any tangible real world knowledge. I think that is a lot more reckless than actually having tangible real world knowledge.
So are you implying that what I don't go out on dates, that I'm not in a relationship, that I've never been in one?
I have no idea.
Right. And
But
I have no idea about yours. And that's the exact point.
well, I mean, if you go through my channel, you'll see that I have tons and tons of experience with girls. Countless.
I've seen a couple of videos of you chatting with women on a couch. They looked very uncomfortable. And I did not like those.
Oh my God, dude. You think the girls that came on my podcast looked uncomfortable?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is the problem is that you filter everything through this like really weird paradigm of everything has to be this patriarchal thing where women are these victims and men are these perpetrators and that like everything is anti-woman to the point where it literally distorts your reality, where you literally think that a chick who fully consented to being on a podcast for which she's going to get massive amounts of clout is uncomfortable.
So can I show you an example of what I'm talking about?
Sure.
There's let's see, what's the name of this video? It's called How to Hold a Conversation. In that video, one of the topics that you discuss is how do you like steer the conversation away from negative topics, which I think is a valid pursuit. I think you should want to do that, right? You should want to steer conversations away from negativity, right? We can all agree on that. When you start having that conversation with them, two of them say something along the lines of, well, it's kind of difficult to do that because we are constantly afraid and worried about being assaulted and harassed and, you know, having harm done to us because that's kind of just what it's like to be a woman. And your response to that is to dust it off and say, well, let's get to some specific phrases that we can say to get away from the negativity. So that is a leading series of questions that is not designed to make your guests comfortable. It's designed to placate you, right? It's not acknowledging their reality. It's brushing it off and saying, well, let's talk about what I want to talk about instead of let's talk about what you, the guest who I had on here, wants to talk about.
Well, that's probably because I'm the host of the channel and I'm trying to keep it on point. I think that's something that literally every single podcast host in history of podcasts does is they're trying to move the conversation forward and they want to stick to the topic at hand, but that's not convincing that the girls are uncomfortable.
We could talk about their body language if you want to. I teach nonverbal classes. I'm happy to unpack their behaviors.
Yeah, sure. Which one is it?
The video, the How to Hold a Conversation video?
Yeah, How to Hold a Convo.
So again, this is the sort of thing where you would need to watch the whole video. The often closed stance that these women take, crossing their arms and crossing their legs, the ways in which their poses shimmer and shake, their inability to select.
Hang on. I have a lot of video like this. So how many girls is it with? Like, can you send me
it's with 3 women and it's with you and your co-host.
Okay. How to Hold a Conversation, PWF. Can you send me the link? Because I'm not finding it.
Yeah, I guess.
Or just pull it up on your end.
Let's see if we can find it.
Well, I've literally never in the history of my podcast had any girl ever tell me that she was uncomfortable with the interview. So,
yeah, and so again, and this is nothing personal against you, but that is a tactic that women will use to avoid problematic situations. They don't complain. They silence themselves and they say, well, okay, that was fine, and then they move on. And this is something that women are taught to do, right? Don't upset the men because, as they were trying to tell you, upset men sometimes hurt women. And I'm not here to say that you would do that. I would never accuse you of doing that without any evidence, but it is a thing that exists and women are taught to avoid it.
Yeah, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think everyone knows that. So yeah, see if you can pull it up. I'm just going to use the restroom real quick.
Mm-hmm. Can I just enter it in the chat? He's in the bathroom. going to paste it in the chat right there. There's the link to anyone who wants to see it. And, how's everybody doing? Hopefully we see a little bit less anti-Semitism this time around. We love anti-Semitism.
All right, let's see this. I want to see these.
Put the link in the chat. Can you see the link in the chat?
Did you private chat it to me or where? Okay, there we go.
I don't think I did, at least. Maybe I did.
Yeah, you did actually, but it's okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, let's what timestamp am I going to?
Great question. I would say throughout the majority of this conversation, you can see some of the nonverbal signals that are being given off by these women in terms of their discomfort. I think that there are also times where these women feel quite comfortable in the conversation. So I'm not here to say that you held these women hostage and asked them a series of difficult, problematic questions that made them want to leave the room. What I'm saying is there were some instances, like for example, and boy, I wish I had saved the timestamp. I thought about it, but specifically when you're talking about how to get away from negative topics, and they try and explain that it's difficult as a woman to do that, you and your co-host there are quite dismissive of their very real lived experiences. And I would argue that the reason for that is because you were interested in getting a sound bite, a sound clip, something that proves your point of this is how you get the ladies, which is the larger problem that I have with your content.
What is the larger problem? That I teach guys how to get ladies, or what's the larger problem?
The larger problem with your content is that you provide a space for aggressive, hateful, and violent men to view themselves as superior to women.
Dude, you've shown zero evidence for any one of the things you said. For aggressive men, show me the evidence that these men are aggressive. Who feel superior to women, show me the evidence for that. These are all just assumptions that you pulled, and I don't know how to say this in a nice way, out of your ass. This is just literally a series of assumptions that you've made. But okay, let's go to this video. And this is a good one because I have a history with these girls. Which one of the girls did you feel was uncomfortable?
Well, why don't we just watch? Why don't we just watch together?
Okay, but we have to. This is a 2-hour podcast, so we have to kind of narrow down somewhat.
That's what he.
So you have to tell me where to go, where you thought that.
Where are we? Where's the part where we're talking about negative conversations, avoiding negative conversations? Q&A, how to steer convo from negative topics. That's right around the 40-minute mark.
40-minute mark.
It's a short conversation.
Okay.
On a date, or you're testing how to steer the convo away from negative topics, like for example, baby daddy, or
uncomfortable situation,
having a bad living situation, or
her having a bad situation.
So you're saying for the guy, the girl's bringing up some type of negative, whatever.
Yeah, how to steer the convo in the.
I think just be honest. Be like, listen, I think, I really feel for what's.
Everyone has a past.
Yeah,
You just have
Girl,
to
you're
have
bumming
a
me out.
No, you just have to have a positive mindset. You can't focus on.
Some girls would be really sensitive about it. It just, again, it's subjective because it depends. If the girl is just really trying to vent and she wants to talk about her shit, and then you're trying to tell her you don't really want to hear about it, she's going to take it the wrong way. But some girls might be mature enough to, if you're just listen, I really respect you, but let's just keep it positive and light, and we'll pick a time we can talk about this stuff.
Oh, let's do a little.
So have you seen any signs of uncomfortableness yet?
Nope, we're doing okay so far for the most part.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Role play. So Sarah, you and I are on a date, and you bring up a negative topic. So go ahead.
I'm turned on by your date.
So I bring up the conversation.
Yes.
Can I be on the date?
You can be on the next date.
I'm a third party on the date. Wait, so I bring up next topic. How do I handle it?
No, you bring it up, and we'll see how I would handle it.
I'm having an appetizer at the date.
Negative.
I don't know.
Too positive.
Is she pretending that you're talking about your issues?
Can you pause it real quick?
Am I supposed to think of an issue that
Yep.
I don't know who the woman in the middle is. She's very obviously uncomfortable with this activity. It's very clear. Her pattern of behavior changes. Her tone of voice changes. She doesn't know what to say. You persist, right? And I'm not saying that there's nothing necessarily, wrong with persisting in that way, but it's very clear that she's uncomfortable. And it's also clear to me that you would rather continue the conversation than address her discomfort.
Oh, Sarah. Okay, that's interesting you say that because she is a recurring guest on our podcast. So after this podcast, she went on our podcast like 3 more times. So, yeah, I don't know why she would keep coming on our podcast if she was so uncomfortable.
Well, I don't know. How do you, can I ask how you know her?
Met her through a friend of a friend of a friend.
Met her through a friend of a friend of a friend. Maybe she's trying to help. Maybe she understands that the men who watch this need to hear certain things about how to treat women and is willing to sacrifice her comfort in order to help.
Again, just shows how little you know about the situation. She's an OnlyFans girl who wants to promote her OnlyFans.
Okay, there's that too. Self-promotion. That's great.
Right, but me and Sarah are homies. Like, there's no way that she would that I made her feel any sort of way. And she's also fairly confident. So if I did, then she would tell me. Like, what is your evidence that she's uncomfortable?
Well, so it's like I said, it's the tone of voice. It's the we call them vocalic kinemes or phonemes, right? The little utterances that she's doing, which is a dramatic change in her baseline behavior, because you've been talking with her for 40 minutes up to that point, and her tone, her posturing, her nonverbal behaviors were dramatically different. Then we get to this part. It changes. She doesn't really know what to say. You continue to push and push and push until she says something. Now, am I saying that you're destroying her psyche? Of course not. But the idea that men who are friends with women can't make them uncomfortable, I guarantee you that I've made my friends who are women, I guarantee you I've made them uncomfortable multiple times and I had no idea, and they probably just never told me. Because again, women are often conditioned not to do that, right? And so it behooves men to train themselves to notice these things and to do better, for lack of a better term.
So
I don't care that she's on OnlyFans.
It's purely your speculation that she's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I told you I would admit more than once that this is speculation on my part. Now, if she comes on here and says that I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, right? I would argue that the changes in her behavior are indicative of discomfort. Doesn't necessarily mean that she's feeling that way, but they are indicative of discomfort. And I found this entire segment extremely cringeworthy and awkward. And I don't think that any good came from it whatsoever.
Okay, well, I found it. I think the fact that she's been on my podcast like 7 or 8 times and she's tried to hook me up with her female friends is fairly indicative of the fact that she's at least somewhat comfortable with me. Certainly that I don't make her extremely uncomfortable. So I think that's that to me is a much more convincing argument than what you saw in a podcast, which I don't think anyone else is seeing at all.
Well, I'm just telling you what the indicators, right? The nonverbal indicators, what they might lead to. Doesn't mean that I'm right? But this is what I know based on the way that nonverbal communication works, is that when someone's baseline behavior changes dramatically, there might be something there.
Yeah, her baseline behaviors did not change dramatically. We were doing a role play involving me and the other chick, so she didn't really have much role in it. I think she was largely bored during that segment because it didn't involve her. So yeah, I don't know how you're going to make that claim that I make girls uncomfortable on the podcast.
I'm not saying that you chronically invite women on and like torture them or anything. I'm saying in this conversation, it's very awkward. The changes in her behavior, I'm talking about the one that you were role playing with. The changes in her behavior indicated that there might be something there worth probing.
Wait, the one I was role playing with? You mean the Alyssa chick, the one that was sitting next to me?
No, if I remember correctly, you were role playing with the woman in the middle. I could be wrong. We could keep watching if you want to.
I believe I was role playing with Alyssa, but yeah, I don't remember. This was a while ago. But I think this is so we're getting into like the extreme weeds of it. The real issue, again, going back to this, is the fundamental disagreement between us is this. I think this is the crux of the fundamental disagreement, is that I don't think that you can learn about game, about dating from reading a bunch of articles and hanging out in ivory tower. I think you have to go out and experience it over and over and over and over again. And that is how you learn this stuff. And I would argue Again, I know nothing about you personally, but I would make a bet that by every single metric, my dating life has been much more successful than yours. Again, I don't want to make it personal, but I would just make that bet. So that to me would indicate, I would also argue that my clients have been a lot more successful than your clients in terms of their dating life. So that to me would indicate that
Well, I
there's
don't have
some
clients, I have students.
students. Okay, we can say students.
But again, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a dating coach. I'm not claiming to be either of those things. You are.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm a dating coach. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we could unpack that if you wanted to, but I don't think it's worth unpacking. In terms of individual experience, again, this is where I see our disagreement. You seem to be under the impression that if you've been on a bunch of dates and you've slept with a bunch of women, I don't know how many. I'm not going to ask you what your body count is. That somehow qualifies you to tell other people who have a completely different set of preferences, likes and dislikes than you, who are pursuing a group of people who have completely different likes and dislikes than the women that you pursue. The fact that you feel qualified by that to advise people, that's what I take issue with. Now, if you wanted to talk about you and your lived experience, hey, this is a date that I went on, this is what I learned from that date, I would applaud that. I think that that's a level of vulnerability that men should strive for. But in my opinion, that's not what you're doing. You are hiding behind hypothetical situations and overgeneralizing statements based on no data and no evidence, just saying, this is my opinion because I'm this guy and you're going to have to take my word for it. You talk about taking my word for things. You're telling everyone just to take your word for it. I don't know how many dates you've been on. I don't know how many people you've slept with, but one thing I can guarantee you is that in addition to having extensive training on the science of relationships, I am also very experienced in the field of dating. I've had a number of successes and a number of failures. I've learned a lot. I've been in a number of very close relationships, number of very, flings or, whatever. That does not qualify me to advise other people in terms of how to handle their relationship. It just doesn't.
Yeah,
my learning does not qualify me to teach other people how to do relationships either.
Then according to this logic, no one would be qualified to give dating advice. First of all, I don't hide behind anything. My channel is not for everyone. It's for people who resonate with what I want. If you're some born again Christian and you want to find a nice conservative Christian girl, my channel is not for you, right? I don't teach that kind of stuff. I like to, have sex on the first or second date, right? So my channel is not for everyone. It's for people who resonate with me and my goals. So that's first. Second of all, just
real quick, I'm saying that the people who resonate you and your goals were saying a whole lot of anti-Semitic shit last week. And I know you told them to be nice, but you got to understand where their instincts are at.
That's a very, very small percentage of people. I
don't care how small of a percent. Not a single Nazi on this planet agrees with me.
Dude, there's some very, very mean people on your side of the internet who tell me I should kill myself. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fucked up. And if you could show me one of my followers who said that, I will block them and tell them never to say that shit again.
I mean, we just pull up my TikTok feed and I can just go through comment after comment. That's like, that just horrible, vile things. You want me to?
Yeah, that's awful. I'm so sorry that you experienced that.
It's okay. I'm tough. I don't care. It doesn't affect me.
Good. Well, no, it should. It should.
Well, no, then I wouldn't be a content creator if I was affected by what some random people on the internet thought.
Well, no, I mean, you can be like understanding of people who critique you and still make content. Like I've been critiqued many times. The difference is that when people critique me, they don't tell me to, unalive myself or what have you. They correct me when I make mistakes and then I apologize for those mistakes.
Right, but the argument that my followers, is your argument that people who support my channel are largely Nazis, white supremacists who hate?
Not largely. I don't think that the general population is is explicitly Nazis. I think that the majority of people who follow you are young, disaffected men who are desperate to learn how to interact with others. And I think what you're offering them is an extremely oversimplified, transactional method of communication that ultimately coddles them, teaches them nothing, and excuses them, treats them like both victims and heroes in their own stories. And that does no favors for anyone.
Well, I think that statement shows how little you know about my content, because if you actually follow my content, you know that I'm very, very outspoken against having any kind of victim mindset. I constantly preach guys not to have any kind of victim mindset, even when the evidence supports having that mindset. I'm very, very anti-victim mindset, and I've had countless videos that that show that. So that's the first thing. Second of all, I give the guys practical, tangible things that they can implement today, not a bunch of random studies, not 10 years worth of education, but practical, tangible tips that a lot of them have a lot of success with. I mean, I've had thousands of clients at this point, maybe tens of thousands, say, hey, man, I met a great girlfriend. Hey, man, I'm no longer depressed. Hey, man, I finally have the kind of self-esteem and dating life that I wanted. So, yeah, I think you would be hard-pressed to argue that I haven't done any of those things.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you for some sort of proof or evidence of tens of thousands of people who benefited from
yeah,
your
we
advice.
could. I mean, where do you want to start? You want to start in my you want to start with my testimonials on my website or YouTube comments, or where should we start? I mean, there's so many.
Oh, we got. I mean, look, I'm talking about people who are you not like? I'm sorry, like, isn't your service like you're a paid dating coach, right? People pay you for you to train them, or am I misinterpreting this?
No, I give a whole bunch of shit away for free. Like 98% of my content, I just give away.
So then what's like your source of income?
I have a product that people who support me buy.
Oh, what's that product? If I may pry.
You may. It's a online dating blueprint. So we basically give guys all the information they need, along with a plethora of examples to help them be very successful when it comes with women.
Okay, so they purchase that from you.
Yes.
Okay, so what's like what's that? What's your revenue looking like, and what's your success rate looking like?
My revenue? I mean, I make a pretty good amount of money. I make like $30,000 a month. At least my business does.
Yeah.
What's my success rate? Like in terms of what?
Oh, just in terms of like men and women who have developed successful relationships based on the blueprints that you've sold them.
There would be really, I don't do like follow-up surveys. I just rely on people to email me. One metric could be refund rate. We have less than 0.1% of people who buy our product ask for a refund, despite us having a pretty liberal refund policy. So I think that's a pretty significant metric that the vast majority of people are happy with it. I mean, I constantly get barraged with emails, DMs, all kinds of stuff with people who are very, very happy. And
I'm not saying that you're missing, or rather, I'm not saying that there's a lack of people who like your content. What I'm saying is that I don't think that your content is helpful in people securing happy, like secure relationships.
Well, that is purely your speculation. It's not in any way. The hundreds of, if not thousands of clients would disagree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see, I don't know, case studies, but that's, now you talk about getting into the weeds. That's getting into the weeds. I'm sure you've sold a lot of people products.
I mean, I'm sure
you've sold plenty of.
Let me pull up my website, and you can see our all the testimonials we have. Here, let's do this.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Playing with Fire. Everything you're about to see is 100% true.
I'll pause this. Okay, let's keep going down. Okay, here it is. Thanks again doing what you do. Got that last girl coming over again. Your work improved my quality of life in meaningful, significant ways. My productivity can really suffer from not getting laid. Okay, that's one. Hey, man, I just wanted to let you know I lost my virginity 2 weeks ago. I'm 25 and have been with 3 other girls since then, all from Tinder and all using your techniques I got from your site. Truly was life-changing. Best product for online game, definitely worth the investment. Best time to get it. I had Lois send me this product called Through All BS. The amount of value gets priceless. Here's another one. Here is you legitimately changed my life, which in turn helped me change other people's life. Here's another one. Okay. Here is another one. This guy's very happy. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch.
So I see a dozen anonymous messages, and I'm not going to say that they're fabricated.
Well, I can't show their identities. Most of these are people who have jobs and shit.
What? Why wouldn't people who have jobs? That doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't people who have jobs want?
Because it's pretty controversial to be associated with a pickup type of product. Yeah, like I totally understand their request for privacy. Like, how does that? I
understand the request for privacy. What strikes me here as I look at this is there's no way for me, somebody who operates with a hermeneutic of suspicion, there's no way for me to tell if any of these are legitimate. And that's not me calling you a liar. All I'm saying is that there's no way for me to tell. And when someone's trying to sell me something for $170, I need to be skeptical. The other thing I'd like to see is I'd like to see testimonial from women. Hey, my boyfriend who you coached, you did such an amazing job. He changed for the better, or yeah, like something like that. You know what I'm saying? Because these could all be genuine, but they could also be fabricated by the people who are claiming them, right? Do you know how many times when I was like 17, 18, 19, you know how many times I lied about the number of women who I had slept with or my success in the dating game? Because that's what men are taught to do.
Okay, well, just because you lied about your success in dating game does not mean I am lying about my testimonials. I have more than enough of real ones.
I'm not necessarily saying that.
But
I'm just saying, what do the kids say? It's sus.
I don't see this as sus at all. Like, what would you like me to do? Well, I have videos of guys. I have videos.
If you did interviews with couples, why don't you have one of the successful couples that you've done on your podcast?
Yeah, I suppose.
Talk about how.
I mean, I suppose I could do that. A lot of people, I would have to see that. I would have to censor their face because most people want to stay anonymous. But sure, yeah, I could do that. But just because I have done that doesn't mean there's anything sus about all the stuff that I've shown. I think it's pretty indicative that I've had some of the top female dating coaches on the planet on my channel. We're talking Courtney Ryan, Marnie, your wing girl, Kezia Noble. These are all close to 1 million followers, very well respected, and they literally agree on me on pretty much every single thing. So I think that right there is pretty indicative of the fact that the stuff I'm teaching is pretty accurate. Yeah.
So I mean, it strikes me that you claim that I was using argument of authority the whole time, but you just used it right there. I don't know who any of those people are. It's great that you have a few other dating coaches who agree with you. I think you're missing the part where I say that dating coaches in general, problematic, right? Many of them grift. I'm not saying that that's what you do. I'm just saying.
I'm not saying it. I'm just kind of implying it.
Hey, if the shoe fits. But the point is, we know that many dating coaches grift.
Sure. We know that a lot of personal trainers are also scammers. That doesn't mean that bodybuilding doesn't work.
Well, yeah, but there's a whole group of people on TikTok dedicated to calling out the scammers who body train, right?
Well, no one's ever called me out.
I have.
Not really. You just made a video saying that I'm probably compensating for something, implying that I'm compensating for my own short height, which is, I don't even know how that could be true since I'm 5'11".
And talking about height, and I wasn't talking about you. But you've been called out by a lot of different people on my side of TikTok. I've watched all their videos. You are known in the community as somebody.
No, I haven't been called out for being a fraud. I've been called out because they think I'm fat phobic, I'm a Nazi, I'm a racist.
Okay, I see. Yeah, you are very much those things. I'm not saying you're a fraud. There's no evidence to support.
I'm a white supremacist?
No, I don't know that to be true. I think that you probably participate in white supremacy unknowingly. That would be my guess, but it's just a guess.
Like I just show up to KKK rallies without while I'm sleepwalking?
No, that's not what a white supremacist is. And quite frankly, we don't have the time to get into that one. That's maybe that's part 4 when we do that. But speaking of that, we really should wrap up because I don't want to get in. It was not my goal to get on here and to call you a fraud and to call you a grifter. And I'm not accusing you of being those things. What I'm saying, and this will be my closing statement, and then the last word is yours. Your content is problematic. Women find it problematic. There are men like myself who find it problematic. And the fact that you seem so obsessed with bestowing credentials upon yourself with no other like education, qualification, or expertise other than the fact that you just exist and think you deserve to give advice to other people is a problem. And I'm going to continue to push back on that, throughout all of our conversations. And if I see you making more problematic videos, I'll continue to call you out on those. And I will continue to cite extant scholarly research supporting my opinion, even though you seem to be under the impression that because I couldn't find the one experimental design study that that proves that the patriarchy exists, that somehow I was incomplete in my research. I think my reference list speaks for itself. And I think that if you really want me to get into it, I could bombard you with more references that you can handle. And I'd probably have to help you walk through it because they're very difficult to read and unpack, which is a problem of the ivory tower. Last word's yours.
All right. Well, where to even begin? I think a lot of your arguments are fairly bad faith. I don't think you're doing it on purpose. I think it's an accidental thing. But I think that a lot of your arguments are fairly bad faith. And I think that you are actually, while you think that you're helping the marginalized group of people, I think you're much more likely to hurt them with perpetuating victim type of mindsets, which I think is fairly problematic in of itself. And you're more than welcome to keep calling me out. When you say I've been called out by the TikTok community, what you really mean is a bunch of triggered social justice warriors who got really triggered when they saw one of my videos, decide to make a response video where they largely ranted and made personal attacks. Then sure, yeah, we can call it that. But no one's ever exposed me as a fraud. No one's ever shown any 1 ounce of proof that I'm a scammer in any way at all. And I think that a lot of the stuff I teach is based in experience, because I've gone out and I've spent 10 years of my life talking to girls, coaching guys, and learn from their experience. And I would argue all day, every day, that is so much more superior than someone who spent 10 years learning about it. 100%, 1,000%, 10,000%. I would so much rather learn from someone who has tangible results for themselves and tangible results for their clients than someone who can just cite a bunch of studies. That's my opinion.
Okay. Well, that's it. And of course, as always, we must agree to disagree. Last thing I'll say is it would be foolish of you to suggest that my knowledge of relationships comes only from theory and none at all from practice. I think and I'm sure that you've had a fair amount of success in the dating game. I think that you would be shocked and appalled to learn how successful I've been in my own individual pursuits. However, I would never use those successes to try and advise other people because that's morally irresponsible. And on that note, I will bid you farewell. Thank you so much for having me on your stream. Much appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do a part 3.
I'm down for it. Maybe we take a break. I'll be in Disneyland.
All right, cool. Yeah, we can revisit this in a few weeks.
All right, be easy.
All right, take care. All right, that was fun. What do you guys think about that debate? Well, I think we got through a lot of stuff. Yeah, I would take all day, like practical, tangible, real life results over just a bunch of random studies. And I found it interesting that all these studies he couldn't even show. Like it was just like, oh, well, here's the sources. Just go into 10 years worth of reading and then you'll understand it. Oh, okay. But we can deep dive into all of my studies and like dissect them step by step. But we can't even show any study on your end. So I found that pretty interesting. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed that debate. I'm sure I'll do more in the near future. I found that one fun. Yeah, guys, thanks everyone for joining. Until next time.